Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the 76th session of the UN General Assembly that is being held right now. Egypt is participating in it. The President is addressing the issues of climate change, sustainable development, and the performance of Egypt in both those files. And joining us here tonight in the studio to shed more light on this topic is Ambassador Gillane Aallam, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, a specialist on international political affairs. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start talking about the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. First off, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is due to deliver Egypt's speech before the United Nations General Assembly in New York later today. Opening the annual assembly, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the United States and China to engage in dialogue, warning of an increasingly divided world. And also today, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi led a military funeral procession of former Minister of Defense, Field Marshal Mohammed Hussein Tantawi, who passed away at the age of 85 earlier today. The funeral was attended by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Minister of Defense and Military Production Mohammed Zaki, and a number of ministers and high-ranking military and state officials. Earlier on his social media account, President el-Sisi mourned the late Field Marshal, saying that he had lost a father, a teacher, and a person who was caring for the sake of his country, adding that he had learned a lot from his dedication to serving the country. The President said Tantawi had confronted the most serious difficulties that Egypt faced in its contemporary history, and noted that he knew him as loving and loyal to Egypt and its people. And President el-Sisi extended his sincere condolences to the people of Egypt and prayed to God to give the family of Tantawi patience and solace. And we're all, on behalf of myself and Nile TV International, pay our respects and tributes and our deepest condolences to Egypt, the citizens, and his family. And also, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi inaugurated on Tuesday a number of mega development projects in Sinai, which link the peninsula to the Delta and the Nile Valley.
Inaugurating a number of mega development projects in Sinai which link the peninsula to the Delta and Nile Valley, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi stressed on Tuesday that the development of Sinai was witnessing would have unprecedented impact. The head of state said the road network scheme will be completed within the coming 2 years. He said the Bahr al-Bakr water station, which will serve Sinai, will be inaugurated during the next few days, adding that the state was giving attention to developing roads and bridges as part of the comprehensive development plan. Touching on health projects, President el-Sisi said the state aims to implement the comprehensive health insurance system ahead of schedule. He noted that the Port Said experiment in the health sector proves the proficiency of the comprehensive health insurance system. The President gave his directives to develop a Ruwaysat city within the Decent Life initiative. Addressing the event, President el-Sisi also mourned the death of Marshal Tantawi and said the inauguration of the projects was not postponed despite the death, as the late Marshal sanctified work and had work ethic. He said Marshal Tantawi was not responsible for any shedding of blood during the events in Egypt, adding that the Hikestep military base will be named after Marshal Tantawi. Addressing the ceremony, Lieutenant General Osama Rabia said the inauguration of the Ahmed Hamdi Tunnel comes in line with an ambitious vision within the strategic project to develop northern Sinai. He said tunnels would be the first choice to pass between the two banks of the canal. Also, Engineering Authority Chief addressed the ceremony. He reviewed the recent projects implemented for the development of Sinai and said 16 roads had been implemented in the Sinai Peninsula, stressing that most of them will be completed by October. The Minister of Health, Dr. Hala Zaid, addressed the event and said Egypt has been a role model in its fight against the coronavirus. Zaid said the health system in Egypt was highly respondent against the coronavirus repercussions. She noted that mega health projects, on top of which was the comprehensive health insurance system, are underway in parallel to the development path undertaken in Egypt. The minister said the health insurance system has registered over 5 million citizens in the first phase, whilst over 52 hospitals and 310 health units and centers have also been developed.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And talking about the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, President Sisi addressed it and talking about climate change and the possibility that Egypt could host the COP27 in 2022 would be a turning point to the role being played by Egypt in such a file. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi participated via video conference in the meeting with heads of state and governments on climate change on the sidelines of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly. The meeting was presided over by Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, with the participation of a number of heads of state and government, including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The President's participation in this important meeting came as a new phase began in international action on climate, given the threat posed by climate change and its negative repercussions on humanity. President el-Sisi underscored the need for developing countries to assume their responsibilities and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in compliance with their international commitments within the Paris Agreement and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The President asserted the need to seriously address any unilateral measures that contribute to exacerbating the repercussions of climate change. Those include primarily the construction of dams on international rivers without the consent of all downstream countries on their filling rules and operations. The President also called on the necessity to deal firmly with any unilateral action that contribute to exacerbating the consequences of climate change, especially establishing dams on transboundary rivers without coming to an agreement with downstream countries on the filling and operating policies of the dams in the framework of adapting to climate change and its impact on Africa. This comes in light of efforts aimed at addressing adaptation issues, which represent a crucial aspect of international action on climate and the utmost priority for developing countries, especially the African continent, which is hardest hit by the phenomenon, notably with regard to water scarcity, drought, desertification, and threats to food security. President Sisi also underlined the need for the next session of the UN Climate Change Conference of the parties chaired by the UK to come out with tangible results in terms of climate change financing and their mechanisms, notably with regard to adaptation efforts and green climate funds. This shall contribute to enhancing nations and actions to climate in developing countries and alleviating most of their burdens, especially in light of the current gap in climate financing between the developing countries' need to live up to their commitments and what is actually available. President el-Sisi announced that Egypt looks forward to hosting the 27th session of the UN Climate Change Conference on 2022 to behalf of Africa. The President asserted that Egypt will work on making the session a radical turning point in international action on climate in partnership with all parties for the benefit of the African continent and the entire world.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and starting off our discussion with Ambassador Aallam. Your Excellency, now, before we start focusing on the climate change and sustainable development, I want to take an overview over the 76th session of the UN General Assembly. which really talks about these issues alongside the combating the coronavirus pandemic all over the world, the economic reform after, post this pandemic. Can you shed light on the theme and the special theme for this 76th session?
Well, this 76th session is really a very tricky session because it addresses itself to a growing pandemic, which we have been suffering from for a couple of years now. And actually, the General Assembly, this is the first time in 2 years that heads of states and government attended in person. 100 of them attended vis-a-vis 200 that are members of the United Nations in terms of organizations, heads of government, states, foreign ministers, observers, and so on. So this is very special. And it is facing a number of crisis situations. As you mentioned, COVID-19. What are we doing? Are we doing enough? Why certain countries are facing problems with vaccinations? Who is able to pursue economic targets while they have this problem? Are we on track for the climate change? We see a heating, overheating. Are we on track on this problem? Are we on track on financing all the projects, the green projects? We are talking about green economy, carbon-free economies. Are we on track in doing this? The local problems and the regional problems here in the Middle East, we have quite a few issues that are not seeing any solutions, though the Secretary General has appointed personal representation for him, representatives for him. So there is a magnitude of crisis there. And then we have a new American US president who is coming. And I think countries want to know whether he is going to follow through what his predecessor, President Trump, has been of disconnecting with multilateralism, with international organization, or is the United States is coming forward again and joining the international community in leading the action for implementing and for fostering the economic development, fostering technology. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, said his vision is that there is a growing tension between China and the United States, and he's concerned that this might affect all the efforts which are being held for anti-corona, anti-COVID, or for development, for poor countries, for vaccination. So he mentioned that. So people were really looking forward, because usually the host country, represented the United States, is the second speaker on the list of speakers in the general debate. So people were very much looking for that and to see. I have seen the statement because it came a little bit earlier, and we can discuss it about that. So this is the general atmosphere, the general feelings prevailing among the members, and there is a long agenda for this session. And I think that yesterday the President el-Sisi made two very important contributions, because we had two very high-level meetings, one regarding climate change, because there is an international conference that's going to be held in the United Kingdom in 6 weeks, actually, and another high-level meeting regarding sustainable development, where the Secretary General conveyed his worries about the future of development while still we are fighting against COVID-19.
Yes. Well, first off, talking about climate change now, the President yesterday, and even before that, he was highlighting the role Egypt is playing turning into a green economy, talking about renewable energy, talking about solar energy, talking about transforming to using natural gas, and all of these things. And he highlighted before that Egypt and the African countries as a whole, they're the biggest price payers for the climate change, even though it is mainly the responsibility as well for the whole world, but mainly the developed countries. And yesterday he asked for the developed countries to play their part in fighting climate change, be it environmentally, be it financially. So, and you've mentioned now that with the change of the US administration, there should be a change, a general change in the strategy and direction. how far is the international community really taking notice of the progress Egypt is making in this file? And does it now, with the change of the US administration, are we both heading towards the same goal, on the same path, or are there still conflicting directions?
Well, let me try to start to highlight what our President el-Sisi, highlighted in a very direct way. He addressed Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Secretary General Guterres, and he said, welcome, thank you for participation. I have 3 requests. Number 1, that the industrialized countries will have to commit to the climate change, that now we have established facts. Science, technology, facts on the ground tell us that we are facing with a serious crisis in terms of climate change. There is a growing heat, volcanoes, we have seen fires all over the world, from China to United States to even Morocco,
Cyprus.
I mean, it's all over. And then so the industrialized countries, the advanced countries, will have to commit to fighting the climate change, to stand by that, to work with their business towards a green economy. So he's asking the commitment of that. Then he said that we have to help the developing countries, particularly the least developed and the most affected. And he is mentioning Africa in particular, because they are not responsible for the emissions. The emissions, the carbon emissions, come from industrialized, from industry, the promotion. So in Africa, because Africa faces desertification, lack of water, food insufficiency, and then he mentioned that as far as water is concerned, we have to make sure that building of dams does not affect the upstream countries without agreement, so in organization in terms of promotion of cooperation, in terms of management of water resources, and therefore there must be agreements regarding sharing of water resources. And then the third point that he asked for is that what the Paris Agreement asked for is that there is a fund, a green fund, and that the world spends $100 billion regarding releasing and releasing funds for countries to be able to fight the climate change, and that this has to come into effect immediately. So I think the President Egypt has been very straightforward, very specific on putting this into effect. As far as we are concerned, I think we are doing a lot. And I think that the President, in his speech that we are waiting for now, will highlight what Egypt has been doing in this particular respect. This is as far as climate change is concerned.
Your Excellency made a couple of points, and I want to break them down. First off, the President called for reliable, real, concrete actions taken by the industrial countries, namely the fund. Now, do you see, after this session, the UN General Assembly session, do you think that countries, industrialized countries, would actually put in $100 billion, as you mentioned, into such a fund?
Well, let me tell you this. I think the General Assembly, this session